My name is Cassandra Brooks, I'm 25 years old, and I'm sitting in a lawyer's office staring at the most outrageous contract I've ever seen. My parents are sitting across from me with smug expressions, watching as their attorney slides a pen across the mahogany table. The document demands 40% of every paycheck I'll ever earn for the rest of my life in exchange for the $20,000 they contributed to my college tuition. It's fair repayment with interest, sweetheart, my mother says with that fake sweet voice she uses when she's being manipulative. My father nods approvingly, adjusting his expensive tie as if this is just another business deal. Before we dive into this wild story, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Drop your location in the comments below, and don't forget to hit that like button if you're ready to hear how my own parents tried to legally enslave me for life. Make sure to subscribe because this story gets absolutely insane, and you won't believe what happens next when I discover the true extent of their scheme. Looking back, the warning signs were all there during my senior year of high school, but I was too blinded by what I thought was parental love to see them clearly. When I received my acceptance letter to Whitmore Business College, one of the most prestigious programs in the country, my parents seemed genuinely thrilled for me. I remember dancing around our spacious kitchen while my mother Margaret hugged me and my father Robert popped open a bottle of champagne to celebrate. "We always knew you had it in you," Dad said, his chest puffed out with pride. "The Brooks family produces winners, and you're going to be the biggest success story yet." Our family had always lived comfortably in our suburban Chicago home. Dad owned a successful accounting firm that served several major corporations, and Mom worked part-time as a real estate agent for high-end properties. We weren't wealthy by any means, but we never worried about money growing up. My younger brother Jake and I had everything we needed and most of what we wanted. So when the conversation about college tuition came up a few days after my acceptance, I was surprised by how quickly my parents offered to help. "Education is an investment," Mom said, settling into her favorite armchair with a cup of coffee. "We believe in investing in our children's futures." The first red flag should have been how insistent they were about which school I should attend. I had also been accepted to the University of Illinois with a partial scholarship that would have covered most of my expenses. The total cost would have been manageable with student loans and a part-time job. But when I mentioned this option, both parents immediately shot it down. "Absolutely not," Dad said firmly. "You're not going to some state school when you have the opportunity to attend Whitmore. The networking opportunities alone are worth the extra cost." Mom nodded enthusiastically, adding that they would be embarrassed to tell their friends I had chosen a lesser institution when I had been accepted somewhere so prestigious. They made the financial arrangement sound almost too good to be true. "We'll handle the tuition payments," Dad explained during one of our family dinners. "You just focus on your studies and make us proud." There was no mention of repayment terms, interest rates, or any kind of formal agreement. When I asked about it, wanting to understand exactly what they expected from me after graduation, Mom waved her hand dismissively. "Don't worry about that now, sweetheart. We're family. We'll figure it out when the time comes." Her smile was warm and reassuring, the same expression she'd worn when helping me with homework or comforting me through teenage heartbreaks. The manipulation became more apparent when it came to my relationship with Tyler Morrison, my boyfriend since junior year. Tyler was supportive of my dreams and had always encouraged me to pursue my goals, even when they seemed ambitious. He planned to attend a community college for 2 years before transferring to finish his degree in engineering, a practical approach that would save money while still achieving his career objectives. My parents had always been polite to Tyler, but as college approached, their attitude shifted dramatically. "You need to focus on your studies," Mom said when I mentioned wanting to maintain our long-distance relationship. "Boys will just distract you from what's really important." Dad was more direct in his disapproval. "Tyler's a nice kid, but he's not going anywhere fast," he told me during a private conversation in his home office. "You're destined for bigger things, Cassie. Don't let small-town thinking hold you back." When I defended Tyler's intelligence and ambitions, Dad's expression hardened. "I'm not paying $20,000 a year for you to spend your time video chatting with some boy instead of building the connections that will determine your entire future." The threat was subtle but clear. Their financial support came with strings attached. The difference in how they treated Jake compared to me became glaringly obvious during this time. When Jake expressed interest in getting his driver's license, Dad immediately took him car shopping and bought him a nearly new Honda Civic. "Every young man needs reliable transportation," he said proudly as they pulled into the driveway with Jake's surprise gift. But when I had needed a car for my part-time job and school activities, I'd had to save for months and buy a used vehicle with my own money. When I pointed out this discrepancy, Mom explained that Jake's situation was different because he was younger and still figuring things out. The implication was that I, as the older child, should be more independent and responsible for myself. As the summer before college progressed, their behavior became increasingly controlling in subtle ways. They insisted on being involved in every aspect of my college preparation, from choosing my meal plan to selecting my dorm room. "We want to make sure you're set up for success," Mom explained when I suggested I could handle these decisions myself. They even demanded to approve my class schedule before I could register, claiming they wanted to ensure I was taking courses that would maximize the value of their investment. The word investment started appearing more frequently in our conversations, though I still didn't fully understand what it meant to them. The final weeks before I left for college, I noticed them having more private conversations that stopped abruptly when I entered the room. Dad spent hours in his office with the door closed, and I occasionally heard him on phone calls discussing financial matters in hushed tones. When I asked Mom about it, she claimed he was just busy with work and dealing with some complicated client issues. "You know how stressed your father gets during tax season," she said, though it was late August and nowhere near tax time. Something felt off about the whole situation, but I was too excited about starting college to pay close attention to these warning signs. My first year at Whitmore exceeded every expectation I had about college life. The academics were challenging but rewarding, and I found myself thriving in the competitive environment. I maintained a 3.8 GPA while participating in the Business Honor Society and securing a coveted internship position for the following summer. Everything seemed to be falling into place perfectly, and I felt grateful for my parents' support in making this opportunity possible. However, their involvement in my college experience went far beyond what I had expected from typical supportive parents. Every few days, I received detailed emails from my mother asking for updates on my grades, social activities, and how I was spending my time. At first, I thought this was normal parental concern, especially given their financial investment in my education. I dutifully responded with information about my test scores, project assignments, and weekend activities. But the questions became increasingly specific and invasive. She wanted to know who I was spending time with, what we talked about, and even details about my study habits and daily schedule. When I mentioned making friends with my roommate Sarah and a few other girls in my dorm, Mom's response was lukewarm. "Just remember that you're there to study, not to socialize," she reminded me. "These friendships are temporary, but your grades will follow you forever." The financial pressure began subtly but escalated throughout my freshman year. Dad would call periodically to discuss my progress and remind me of the sacrifices they were making to support my education. "Do you realize how much money we're spending on you?" became a frequent opening to these conversations. He would itemize the costs: tuition, room and board, meal plans, textbooks, and even my personal expenses. "We're investing over $30,000 this year in your future," he would say. "I hope you understand the magnitude of what we're doing for you." The weight of their financial contribution began to feel less like a gift and more like a burden I was expected to carry. When I brought up my relationship with Tyler during one of our weekly phone calls, the conversation took an unexpectedly harsh turn. Tyler and I had been managing our long-distance relationship reasonably well, talking regularly and visiting each other when possible. But my parents saw this as a dangerous distraction from my studies. "This relationship has to end," Mom declared during a particularly tense conversation. "You're not focusing properly on your education, and we can see it affecting your performance." When I pointed out that my grades were excellent and I had earned recognition from several professors, she dismissed this as irrelevant. You could be doing even better if you weren't wasting time on romance, she insisted. Dad threatened to withdraw their financial support if I didn't break up with Tyler immediately. We're not paying for you to have a college boyfriend, he said coldly. If maintaining this relationship is more important to you than your education, then you can figure out how to pay for school yourself. The ultimatum was delivered with the same businesslike tone he used with difficult clients. I knew they weren't bluffing. Dad's accounting background had taught him to approach everything like a cost-benefit analysis, and he clearly viewed Tyler as a liability that needed to be eliminated. With crushing reluctance and a broken heart, I ended my relationship with the person who had been my biggest supporter and closest confidant. Uncle David, Dad's business partner and my father's younger brother, visited campus during family weekend that fall. Unlike my parents, Uncle David seemed genuinely interested in my experiences and accomplishments without constantly evaluating everything through a financial lens. Over lunch at a quiet restaurant near campus, he asked thoughtful questions about my classes and future career goals. As we talked, I noticed him glancing around nervously, as if he was worried about being overheard. Cassie, he said quietly, leaning across the table, I want you to know that you can always call me if you need anything. Sometimes family situations can get complicated, and you might need someone to talk to who isn't directly involved. His words seemed oddly specific, and I wondered what he meant by complicated family situations. Throughout my sophomore year, my parents became increasingly isolated from their extended family and mutual friends. They declined invitations to holiday gatherings and stopped hosting their traditional summer barbecue. When I asked about this during a rare visit home, Mom explained that they were too busy with work and didn't have time for social obligations. People can be jealous of success, she said with a bitter edge to her voice. Some family members have been making snide comments about how much we're spending on your education, as if it's any of their business. This explanation didn't sit well with me because our extended family had always been supportive and close-knit, but I didn't feel comfortable challenging my parents' version of events. The isolation strategy extended to my college relationships as well. Whenever I mentioned new friendships or study groups, my parents found reasons to discourage these connections. They claimed my classmates might be trying to use me for help with assignments or that I was being too trusting of people who didn't have my best interests at heart. You're too naive about people's motivations, Dad warned during one of our conversations. Everyone wants something, and you need to protect yourself from users and manipulators. The irony of this advice coming from him would become painfully clear years later, but at the time, I internalized their warnings and became more cautious about forming close relationships. My mental health began deteriorating under the constant pressure and scrutiny. I developed anxiety that manifested in perfectionist tendencies and people-pleasing behaviors that went far beyond normal academic stress. Every assignment felt like it carried the weight of my family's expectations and financial sacrifice. I found myself working obsessively on projects that were already excellent, terrified that anything less than perfection would disappoint my parents and potentially jeopardize their continued support. Sleep became elusive as I lay awake worrying about meeting their expectations and maintaining the performance standards they had established. The first major betrayal occurred during my sophomore year when I discovered my parents had been reading my private journal. I kept a diary where I wrote about my thoughts, feelings, and struggles with the pressure I was experiencing. During a visit home for Thanksgiving, I found the journal in a slightly different position than where I had left it, and some of the pages showed evidence of being handled. When I confronted my parents about this invasion of privacy, they showed no remorse. We have a right to know what's going on with you, Mom said matter-of-factly. We're investing too much money to be kept in the dark about your emotional state. Dad added that they had found some concerning entries about stress and wanted to make sure I wasn't developing any problems that might affect my academic performance. Even worse was the discovery that they had been monitoring my spending through the shared credit card they had given me for college expenses. I found out when I tried to purchase textbooks for an elective course and the transaction was declined. When I called to inquire about the problem, Dad explained that he had flagged the purchase because he didn't approve of the class I was taking. Art history isn't going to help your career prospects, he said dismissively. We're not paying for you to waste time on frivolous subjects. This was the moment I realized that their financial support came with complete control over every aspect of my life, from my academic choices to my personal expenses. The golden cage they had built around me was becoming smaller and more restrictive with each passing semester. Graduation day arrived with all the pomp and ceremony I had dreamed about throughout my 4 years at Whitmore. I walked across the stage summa cum laude, my academic achievements representing countless hours of dedication and hard work. As I accepted my diploma, I spotted my parents in the crowd, both beaming with pride and taking photos with expensive cameras. For a brief moment, I felt the pure joy of accomplishment and the warmth of family support that I had been craving throughout college. The celebration they had planned was elaborate and expensive, held at an upscale restaurant with dozens of relatives and family friends in attendance. Dad gave a speech about my achievements that brought tears to my eyes, and Mom presented me with a beautiful gold watch engraved with my graduation date. The job offers began arriving within weeks of graduation, a testament to Whitmore's prestigious reputation and my strong academic record. The most attractive opportunity came from Morrison Strategic Consulting, one of the top firms in the industry, offering a starting salary that exceeded my most optimistic expectations along with comprehensive benefits and clear advancement opportunities. When I shared this exciting news with my parents, their reaction was enthusiastic but oddly focused on the financial details. "How much exactly?" Dad asked immediately, pulling out his phone calculator to run numbers. "What about bonuses? Stock options? Retirement contributions?" His questions went far beyond typical parental curiosity about my career prospects. Mom wanted to know about every aspect of the job negotiations, from the initial offer to my counterproposals and the final agreed-upon terms. "We want to make sure you're maximizing your earning potential," she explained when I questioned why they needed such detailed information. "After all the money we've invested in your education, it's important that you're positioned for financial success." The word invested continued to appear frequently in our conversations, always with an emphasis that made it sound more like a business transaction than a family gift. I began to feel uncomfortable with their intense focus on my income, but I attributed it to their natural concern for my financial security. During a family dinner a few days after I accepted the position at Morrison, Dad mentioned scheduling a meeting to discuss repayment terms for my college expenses. This was the first time anyone had explicitly mentioned repayment, and I was surprised by the formal way he approached the topic. "I thought we could work out a reasonable payment plan," he said, cutting his steak with deliberate precision. "Something fair that acknowledges our investment while allowing you to establish your own financial foundation." I assumed he was talking about a standard loan arrangement, perhaps something similar to federal student loans with a reasonable interest rate and manageable monthly payments. The meeting was scheduled for the following week at the office of Harrison Mitchell, the family's longtime attorney who had handled various legal matters for my parents' business over the years. I had known Mr. Mitchell since childhood. He was a family friend who attended our holiday parties and occasionally joined us for summer barbecues. The formal setting seemed unnecessary for what I expected to be a straightforward discussion about loan terms, but my parents insisted that having everything properly documented would protect everyone involved. "It's just good business practice," Dad explained. "Even family members should have clear agreements about financial matters." As the meeting date approached, my excitement about starting my new career began to feel overshadowed by my parents' increasingly controlling behavior. They wanted copies of all my employment documents and insisted on being present when I signed my offer letter. When I suggested that I was old enough to handle my own job negotiations, Mom became defensive and hurt. "After everything we've done for you, the least you could do is keep us informed about the most important decisions of your life," she said with tears in her eyes. "We're not trying to control you, we just want to protect our investment and make sure you're making smart choices." My college advisor, Professor Williams, contacted me unexpectedly during this period to check on my post-graduation transition. Professor Williams had been a mentor throughout my time at Whitmore, and her interest in my well-being felt genuinely caring rather than controlling. When I mentioned the upcoming meeting with my parents and their lawyer, her expression grew concerned. "Cassie, can I share something with you that might be relevant?" she asked, closing her office door for privacy. I had a student several years ago whose family tried to legally bind her to financial obligations that went far beyond reasonable loan repayment. The situation became quite complicated and ultimately required legal intervention. She encouraged me to consider consulting with an independent attorney before signing any documents, advice that seemed overly cautious at the time but would prove invaluable later. Driven by a growing sense of unease, I began researching my family's financial situation more thoroughly. Using my business school training, I analyzed publicly available information about Dad's accounting firm and looked into property records and other financial indicators. What I discovered was troubling. The firm appeared to be struggling financially, with several major clients having departed over the past 2 years. Our family home had been refinanced multiple times, and the mortgage balance was significantly higher than it had been when I started college. Dad's expensive car was leased rather than owned, and many of the luxury items that had symbolized our family's success were financed rather than purchased outright. My brother Jake, now a senior in high school, inadvertently provided another piece of the puzzle during a casual conversation about his college plans. "I'm so grateful that Mom and Dad are paying for everything," he said enthusiastically. "They promised me a completely free ride through medical school, no loans or anything. They said you're going to help make that possible once you start working." His innocent comment sent chills down my spine as I began to understand that my parents' financial support wasn't generosity but rather an investment strategy designed to fund the family's lifestyle and Jake's education using my future earnings. The night before the scheduled meeting, I confronted my parents directly about what I had discovered regarding their financial situation. The conversation quickly escalated into a heated argument when Dad accused me of snooping and being ungrateful for their sacrifices. "Do you think it was easy for us to come up with $20,000? He demanded angrily. "We put our financial security at risk to give you opportunities, and now you're questioning our motives?" Mom broke down crying, claiming that my suspicious behavior was breaking her heart after everything they had done for me. The emotional manipulation was overwhelming, and I went to bed that night feeling confused, guilty, and deeply anxious about what the next day would bring. The law office of Harrison Mitchell occupied an entire floor of a downtown high-rise, with marble floors, mahogany paneling, and the kind of intimidating atmosphere designed to impress clients and establish authority. As I sat in the conference room waiting for the meeting to begin, I tried to calm my nerves by focusing on the city skyline visible through the floor-to-ceiling windows. My parents arrived precisely on time, both dressed in their most professional attire as if attending a crucial business negotiation rather than a family discussion. Mr. Mitchell greeted us warmly, his familiar smile and grandfatherly demeanor providing some comfort in the formal setting. The contract he presented was bound in professional legal document covers and bore an official-looking title, Family Investment Recovery Agreement. The thickness of the document surprised me. What I had expected to be a simple loan agreement appeared to be a comprehensive legal contract spanning dozens of pages with multiple sections, subsections, and appendices. Mr. Mitchell began explaining the terms with the same measured tone he might use for any routine legal matter, as if the extraordinary nature of what he was proposing was completely normal and reasonable. The core provision was breathtaking in its scope and audacity. I would be required to pay my parents 40% of all future earnings for a period of 25 years in exchange for the $20,000 they had contributed to my college tuition. This wasn't limited to my base salary but included bonuses, commission payments, investment returns, and even inheritances from other relatives. The contract defined earnings so broadly that it would have captured virtually every dollar that came into my possession through any means whatsoever. The mathematical implications were staggering. Over the course of 25 years, this arrangement would result in my paying them potentially hundreds of thousands or even millions of dollars. Additional clauses in the contract were equally shocking in their invasiveness and control. My parents would have mandatory approval rights over major life decisions including marriage, having children, changing careers, or making significant investments. They would have access to my tax returns, bank statements, and other financial records in perpetuity to ensure compliance with the payment terms. Any attempt to reduce my income artificially or hide earnings would result in immediate acceleration of the entire debt plus penalties and interest. The contract even included provisions for what would happen if I died or became disabled, with my estate or insurance proceeds being subject to their claims. My parents presented their justification with the polished confidence of seasoned business negotiators who had rehearsed their arguments extensively. Dad explained that the 40% figure represented not just repayment of their $20,000 investment but also reasonable interest rates, opportunity costs, and compensation for the financial risks they had undertaken on my behalf. If we had invested that money in the stock market instead of your education, we could have earned substantial returns, he argued. This arrangement simply ensures that we receive fair compensation for choosing to invest in you instead of traditional investments. Mom focused on the emotional aspects of their sacrifice, describing sleepless nights worrying about their financial security and the stress of taking on debt to fund my education. "We mortgaged our future for you," she said with tears in her eyes. "We believed in your potential when nobody else would take that risk. All we're asking for is fair recognition of what we've given up for your dreams." The combination of financial arguments and emotional manipulation was overwhelming, designed to make me feel guilty for even questioning the reasonableness of their demands. When I expressed shock and refused to sign the contract, the atmosphere in the room shifted dramatically. The warm, family-oriented facade dropped away, replaced by cold business-like aggression that I had never seen from my parents before. Dad's voice became sharp and threatening as he outlined the legal consequences of my refusal. "If you won't agree to reasonable repayment terms, then we'll have no choice but to demand immediate repayment of the full $20,000 plus accrued interest," he warned. "We have documentation of every penny we spend on your behalf, and we're prepared to pursue legal action if necessary." The revelation that my parents had taken out a second mortgage on their home to pay for my education was presented as further evidence of their sacrifice and my obligation to comply with their demands. "We put our house at risk for you," Mom sobbed dramatically. "If you don't help us now, we could lose everything. Is that what you want? To see your family homeless because you're too selfish to honor your obligations?" The emotional blackmail was expertly crafted, designed to exploit my love for them and my natural desire to protect my family from financial hardship. Brother Jake was brought into the conversation as both a victim and a weapon in their arsenal of guilt and manipulation. Dad explained that Jake's medical school dreams depended entirely on my cooperation with their financial plan. "Your brother has worked his entire life toward becoming a doctor," he said sternly. "If you destroy this family's financial stability with your selfishness, you'll be destroying his future too. Is that really what you want your legacy to be?" The implication was clear: any refusal on my part would make me directly responsible for crushing Jake's dreams and aspirations. Uncle David's unexpected arrival at the law office changed the dynamic of the entire meeting. He had apparently been suspicious about the secretive nature of the meeting and had used his spare key to Dad's office to review some financial documents that had been left on the desk. His face was flushed with anger as he burst through the conference room door, demanding to see the contract they were trying to force me to sign. "Let me understand this correctly," he said after quickly scanning the document. "You're trying to turn your own daughter into an indentured servant to pay for your financial mistakes?" Uncle David's horror and immediate support provided the validation I desperately needed to trust my instincts about the situation. "This is financial abuse," he declared flatly, his voice shaking with emotion. "This contract is designed to exploit Cassie for the rest of her working life. No legitimate parent would ever ask their child to sign something like this." His professional background in business gave weight to his assessment, and his obvious concern for my welfare stood in stark contrast to my parents' self-serving motivations. My parents' reaction to Uncle David's intervention revealed the true nature of their scheme. Instead of engaging with his concerns about the contract's fairness, they immediately turned on him with vicious personal attacks. "You've always been jealous of our success," Mom spat venomously. "Now you're trying to poison our daughter against us because you can't stand to see us succeed." Dad accused Uncle David of trying to manipulate me for his own benefit, claiming that he wanted to damage our family relationships to gain some kind of business advantage. Their immediate shift to attack mode demonstrated that they had no legitimate defense for their outrageous demands. I left the meeting without signing anything, despite increasingly desperate pleas and threats from my parents. As I walked toward the elevator, Dad delivered his final ultimatum with the cold precision of a business ultimatum: "You have until tomorrow to reconsider your decision. Sign the contract and remain part of this family, or refuse and be dead to us forever. There's no middle ground here." The elevator doors closed on the most devastating moment of my life, as I realized that the people I had loved and trusted most had been planning to exploit me for years, and my refusal to submit to their scheme would cost me my family forever. The 24 hours following my departure from the lawyer's office marked the beginning of the most intense psychological warfare I had ever experienced. My parents launched a coordinated campaign designed to break down my resistance through every means at their disposal, starting with immediate financial pressure that was intended to force me into compliance through desperation. At 8 o'clock the next morning, I received a formal legal notice demanding repayment of exactly $23,437.62, representing their claimed investment in my education plus calculated interest. The precision of the figure and the official letterhead made it clear that this had been planned well in advance, not hastily thrown together in response to my refusal. The financial warfare extended beyond simple debt collection into active attempts to sabotage my ability to earn the money they were demanding. My parents began a systematic campaign to damage my professional reputation before I could even begin my new career. Anonymous emails were sent to Morrison Strategic Consulting's Human Resources Department, containing fabricated allegations about my character and professional integrity. The messages claimed that I had been involved in academic dishonesty at Whitmore, had substance abuse problems, and had a history of financial irresponsibility that made me unsuitable for a position requiring trust and discretion. Though these allegations were completely false, they created doubt and concern among my new employers. Social manipulation became another front in their war against my independence. My parents contacted extended family members, longtime family friends, and even some of my former teachers with their carefully crafted version of events. In their narrative, I had become an ungrateful and selfish young woman who was refusing to honor my obligations to the family that had sacrificed everything for my success. They painted themselves as heartbroken victims of my cruelty, claiming that I was demanding a free ride while showing no appreciation for their generosity. Many people who had known me since childhood received tearful phone calls from my mother describing my alleged betrayal and asking for support in convincing me to do the right thing. Brother Jake became both a victim and a weapon in their campaign against me. They pressured him relentlessly to contact me and add his voice to their demands for compliance. The conversations with Jake were heartbreaking because I could hear the genuine confusion and pain in his voice as he struggled to understand why I was tearing the family apart. He had been told that my refusal to sign the contract would make it impossible for our parents to pay for his medical school, effectively ending his dreams of becoming a doctor. "Please just sign the papers, Cassie," he begged during one particularly difficult phone call. "I don't understand why you're being so stubborn about this. They just want you to pay them back for college, which seems fair to me." The workplace sabotage escalated when my parents began contacting Morrison Strategic Consulting directly, claiming to be concerned family members reporting dangerous behavior. They alleged that I was having mental health problems that could affect my job performance and suggested that the company should be aware of potential red flags. These calls were designed to plant seeds of doubt about my stability and reliability, creating problems that could jeopardize my employment before I had even started working. The fact that they were willing to destroy my career prospects while simultaneously demanding that I earn money to pay them demonstrated the depth of their manipulation and control. Linda Rodriguez, the accountant who handled my family's business finances, emerged as an unexpected ally during this period. Linda had worked with Dad's firm for over 10 years and had intimate knowledge of their financial situation and business practices. Troubled by some irregularities she had noticed in recent months, she reached out to me privately to share information that put my parents' behavior in a new and disturbing context. "I think you need to know what's really been going on with your family's money," she said during a secret meeting at a coffee shop across town from her office. Linda's revelations were shocking in their scope and criminality. My parents had been systematically embezzling money from Uncle David's portion of their shared business, manipulating accounting records to hide the theft and using the stolen funds to maintain their lifestyle and pay for my college education. The $20,000 they had contributed to my tuition hadn't come from their legitimate earnings or savings but rather from money they had stolen from Uncle David over a period of several years. This meant that their entire claim to having sacrificed for my education was built on criminal activity and fraud. The evidence Linda provided included copies of altered financial statements, forged documents, and email communications between my parents discussing their theft and cover-up strategies. She had been documenting these irregularities for months, initially hoping to find innocent explanations but eventually realizing that she was witnessing systematic financial fraud. "I can't be party to this anymore," she told me with obvious distress. "Your uncle is a good man who trusted your parents completely, and they've been stealing from him to fund their own lifestyle. When he finds out what they've done, it's going to destroy him." Anonymous harassment began appearing across multiple platforms as my parents escalated their psychological warfare. Fake social media profiles were created to post damaging content about me, including fabricated stories about my personal life and professional conduct. These profiles were sophisticated enough to appear legitimate, complete with stolen photos and detailed backstories designed to make the harassment seem credible. The posts were crafted to damage my reputation among potential employers, romantic partners, and anyone else who might search for information about me online. My parents hired a private investigator to dig up dirt on my personal life, hoping to find information they could use to blackmail me into submission or damage my credibility if I tried to expose their scheme. The investigator followed me, photographed me, and attempted to interview people from my past about potentially embarrassing or damaging information. When I discovered this surveillance through a friend who had been contacted by the investigator, I realized that my parents viewed me not as their daughter but as an enemy to be destroyed if I couldn't be controlled. The revelation that the contract had been prepared months before my graduation provided final confirmation that this entire scheme had been premeditated for years. Linda showed me evidence that Mr. Mitchell had been working on the legal documents since my junior year of college, with multiple drafts and revisions designed to maximize my parents' control and minimize my ability to escape their demands. Every expression of support, every proud moment, every family celebration during my final years of college had been tainted by their secret planning to trap me in legal bondage for the rest of my working life. The depth of their deception and the length of their planning demonstrated that I had never been their beloved daughter but rather an investment asset to be monetized at the appropriate time. The decision to hire my own attorney marked the first time in months that I felt like I was taking control of my situation rather than simply reacting to my parents' attacks. Diana Walsh came highly recommended from Professor Williams, who had researched attorneys specializing in family financial abuse cases after our conversation about my situation. Diana's office was smaller and less intimidating than Mr. Mitchell's corporate law firm, but her immediate grasp of the legal issues and her obvious anger at my parents' behavior gave me hope that I had finally found someone who could help me fight back effectively. Diana's initial assessment of the contract was devastating to my parents' legal position. "This document is unconscionable on multiple levels," she explained during our first meeting, highlighting specific provisions that violated basic principles of contract law. No reasonable court would enforce terms that essentially create debt slavery in exchange for what amounts to a modest education loan. The power imbalance, the excessive terms, and the obvious duress involved in the signing process all work in your favor. Her analysis revealed that my parents and their attorney had overreached so dramatically that they had actually created a legally vulnerable position for themselves. The evidence-gathering phase of our counterattack began immediately, with Diana's team working to document every aspect of my parents' harassment campaign and financial misconduct. We collected copies of the threatening emails, recorded the harassing phone calls, and gathered witness statements from people who had been contacted by my parents with their misleading version of events. Uncle David provided crucial testimony about the business relationship and the irregularities he had noticed in their shared financial accounts. Linda Rodriguez courageously agreed to serve as a witness, despite the professional risks involved in exposing her former client's criminal behavior. Uncle David's decision to come forward with evidence of the embezzlement transformed our case from a simple contract dispute into a potential criminal matter. His detailed records of business transactions showed a pattern of systematic theft spanning several years, with my parents using sophisticated accounting manipulations to hide their crimes. The total amount stolen exceeded $60,000, making this a felony-level offense that could result in serious prison time if prosecuted. Diana immediately contacted the district attorney's office to report the financial crimes and coordinate our civil case with any potential criminal prosecution. The preparation of our counter-lawsuit revealed the full scope of my parents' misconduct and provided us with powerful legal weapons to use in our fight for my freedom. We filed charges including fraud, harassment, defamation, intentional infliction of emotional distress, and attempted extortion. The evidence supporting these charges was overwhelming, from the forged business documents to the recorded phone calls threatening to destroy my career. Diana's legal team worked around the clock to build an airtight case that would not only free me from their contract but also ensure that they faced serious consequences for their actions. My parents' response to our legal offensive was to escalate to what Diana called the nuclear option, attempting to have me declared mentally incompetent so they could gain legal control over my financial decisions. This desperate move involved collaborating with Dr. Stephen Hartwell, our longtime family physician who owed significant money to Dad's accounting firm for tax preparation services and other financial assistance. Dr. Hartwell agreed to sign papers supporting a psychiatric evaluation that could potentially result in my being committed involuntarily and declared unable to manage my own affairs. The attempt to have me forcibly committed to a psychiatric facility was the most terrifying escalation in my parents' campaign of abuse. They had scheduled an appointment with a psychiatrist who specialized in competency evaluations, claiming that I was having a mental breakdown and posed a danger to myself. The plan was to have me declared mentally incompetent, which would allow them to become my legal guardians with complete control over my finances and life decisions. Only Diana's quick intervention and emergency court filing prevented this nightmare scenario from being carried out successfully. Diana's investigation into the psychiatric evaluation scheme revealed that this was not a spontaneous decision but rather a calculated strategy that had been planned as a backup option if I refused to sign the contract voluntarily. Dr. Hartwell had been cultivating a fake medical history for me, creating documentation of mental health problems that had never existed. The psychiatric evaluation was to be conducted by Dr. Margaret Foster, who had a questionable reputation for producing evaluations that favored whoever was paying her fees rather than providing objective medical assessments. The discovery of emails between my parents discussing their investment recovery strategy provided the smoking gun evidence we needed to prove premeditation and fraud. These communications, retrieved from Linda's records and Uncle David's business files, showed months of planning for the contract scheme and backup plans for forcing my compliance if I initially refused. The emails discussed various psychological pressure tactics, financial manipulation strategies, and legal maneuvers designed to trap me in their arrangement regardless of my personal wishes or well-being. We filed for a temporary restraining order to stop my parents' harassment campaign and protect me from further attempts at forced psychiatric commitment. The court hearing was my first opportunity to present our evidence publicly, and Diana's presentation was devastating to my parents' credibility. The judge was visibly shocked by the scope of their misconduct and the sophistication of their scheme to exploit their own daughter. The restraining order was granted immediately, with strong language condemning their behavior and warning of serious consequences if they violated the court's protection order. My parents' violation of the restraining order came within 48 hours of its issuance, demonstrating their complete disregard for legal authority and their desperation to maintain control over me. They appeared at my workplace, creating a public scene that required security intervention and police response. Dad screamed accusations about my ingratitude and mental instability while Mom sobbed dramatically about her broken heart and destroyed family. The incident was witnessed by dozens of my new colleagues and resulted in my parents being arrested for contempt of court and violation of a protective order. Morrison Strategic Consulting's response to learning the truth about my situation was overwhelmingly supportive and demonstrated the kind of professional integrity that my parents had tried to convince me didn't exist in the business world. The company's management immediately issued a statement supporting me completely and offering whatever legal and financial resources might be needed to resolve the situation. My supervisor explained that they had been suspicious of the anonymous allegations from the beginning because they contradicted everything they had learned about my character during the interview process. The firm's backing provided both practical support and emotional validation during the most difficult period of my life. The Federal Bureau of Investigation's involvement began when Diana reported the interstate nature of the financial fraud involving Uncle David's business operations across multiple states. Agent Sarah Coleman, a specialist in white-collar crime and family financial abuse cases, took immediate interest in the sophisticated nature of my parents' scheme and the potential for additional victims beyond our immediate family. The FBI's resources and investigative capabilities transformed our case from a civil family dispute into a comprehensive criminal investigation that would ultimately expose a much larger pattern of financial predation and fraud. Agent Coleman's initial review of the evidence revealed that my parents' financial crimes extended far beyond the embezzlement from Uncle David's business accounts. Their accounting firm had been systematically overcharging clients, manipulating tax returns to generate larger fees, and creating fake business expenses that were passed through to unsuspecting customers. The sophistication of their fraud suggested years of experience and careful planning, indicating that they had been operating as financial predators for much longer than anyone had realized. The FBI's forensic accountants began unraveling a complex web of financial misconduct that involved dozens of victims and hundreds of thousands of dollars in stolen money. Mr. Mitchell's abandonment of my parents as clients provided another crucial breakthrough in the investigation. Faced with overwhelming evidence of their criminal behavior and the potential for his own law license to be jeopardized by association with their schemes, he immediately withdrew from representing them and began cooperating with federal investigators. His files contained detailed records of other questionable legal arrangements he had prepared for my parents, including similar contracts they had attempted to impose on other young family members and business associates. The pattern of exploitation was clear and systematic, demonstrating that their attempt to enslave me financially was part of a larger strategy of using legal manipulation to control and exploit vulnerable people. Extended family members began coming forward with their own stories of financial manipulation and abuse as news of the federal investigation spread through our family network. Cousin Michelle revealed that my parents had convinced her parents to invest her college fund in a guaranteed return investment scheme that turned out to be a complete fraud. The money had been stolen and never returned, forcing Michelle to abandon her plans for higher education and settle for a minimum wage job instead of pursuing her dream of becoming a teacher. Her story was heartbreakingly similar to mine, involving trusted family members using emotional manipulation and false promises to exploit someone they claimed to love. The revelation about my grandparents' estate management provided perhaps the most damaging evidence of my parents' long-term pattern of financial exploitation. As executors of my grandparents' will, they had systematically stolen money that was meant to be distributed to all the grandchildren for education and other expenses. Instead of the modest inheritance we had all been told was our share, the estate had actually contained substantial assets that my parents had diverted to their own use. Uncle David's investigation revealed that each grandchild should have received nearly $15,000, money that would have made college affordable for everyone without creating the kind of debt bondage my parents had attempted to impose on me. Multiple family members filed civil lawsuits as the scope of my parents' financial crimes became clear, creating a complex legal situation that required coordination between various attorneys and law enforcement agencies. The district attorney's office opened a comprehensive criminal investigation that eventually resulted in federal charges being filed under the Racketeer-Influenced and Corrupt Organizations Act, treating my parents' activities as an ongoing criminal enterprise. The RICO charges carried the potential for decades in prison and complete asset forfeiture, representing the most serious legal consequences possible for their years of financial predation. My parents' attempt to flee the country demonstrated their consciousness of guilt and their awareness that the evidence against them was overwhelming. FBI surveillance had detected their preparations for international travel, including the transfer of money to offshore accounts and the purchase of one-way airline tickets to a country without extradition treaties with the United States. Their arrest at the airport was captured by news cameras, providing dramatic footage of their downfall and ensuring that their crimes would receive extensive media coverage. The image of them being led away in handcuffs became symbolic of the consequences that await people who exploit their own family members for financial gain. The asset seizure process began immediately following their arrest, with federal agents freezing all bank accounts, investment portfolios, real estate holdings, and other valuable property that had been purchased with stolen money. Our family home, Dad's luxury vehicles, and even Mom's jewelry collection were impounded as evidence and potential restitution for their victims. The thoroughness of the asset seizure demonstrated the federal government's commitment to ensuring that crime doesn't pay and that victims have the best possible chance of recovering their stolen money. Brother Jake's placement in protective custody was necessary both for his physical safety and to ensure his availability as a witness in the upcoming criminal trials. The revelation of our parents' true nature had devastated him psychologically, and he required intensive counseling to process the trauma of learning that everything he had believed about our family was built on lies and criminal activity. His testimony would be crucial to establishing the full scope of our parents' manipulation and control, but his emotional well-being had to be the primary consideration in determining how to proceed with his involvement in the legal proceedings. The discovery of offshore accounts in Caribbean and Swiss banks revealed that my parents had been planning their international escape for years, systematically moving stolen money out of the United States to fund a comfortable retirement abroad while leaving their victims to deal with the financial devastation they had created. The sophistication of their money laundering operation impressed even experienced federal investigators, who described it as one of the most elaborate family-based financial crime schemes they had ever encountered. The international scope of their crimes meant that multiple foreign governments would need to cooperate in the investigation and eventual prosecution. Uncle David's business was saved through emergency restructuring and the cooperation of employees and customers who had been unaware of my parents' theft from the company accounts. The process of rebuilding trust and financial stability would take time, but the business had strong fundamentals and a good reputation that had been damaged but not destroyed by my parents' crimes. Uncle David's decision to mortgage his personal assets to keep the company operational during the investigation demonstrated his commitment to making things right for everyone who had been affected by his partner's criminal behavior. The media attention surrounding our case grew rapidly as reporters recognized the compelling nature of a story involving family betrayal, financial exploitation, and ultimate justice. National news outlets picked up the story, and I found myself receiving interview requests from television programs, magazines, and online publications. The attention was overwhelming at times, but it also provided an opportunity to educate the public about family financial abuse and to encourage other victims to come forward with their own stories. The publicity surrounding our case led to dozens of similar cases being reported to authorities across the country, suggesting that this type of exploitation was far more common than anyone had realized. The federal courthouse was packed with family members, media representatives, and supporters as my parents' criminal trial began 18 months after their arrest at the airport. The prosecution team, led by Assistant United States Attorney Rebecca Martinez, had spent over a year building an airtight case that included testimony from more than 30 victims, hundreds of documents proving financial fraud, and expert analysis of the sophisticated money laundering operation my parents had been running. The evidence was so overwhelming that even their expensive defense attorneys had privately advised them to accept a plea bargain, but their narcissistic personalities prevented them from acknowledging guilt or accepting responsibility for their crimes. My testimony as the primary victim lasted 3 full days and covered everything from the initial manipulation during my college years to the attempted forced psychiatric commitment that had finally triggered the federal investigation. Speaking publicly about the intimate details of my family's dysfunction was emotionally exhausting, but I felt a responsibility to ensure that the jury understood not just the financial aspects of my parents' crimes but also the psychological manipulation and emotional abuse that had made their scheme possible. Diana had prepared me extensively for the cross-examination, but nothing could have prepared me for the experience of having my own mother's attorney try to paint me as an ungrateful daughter who had fabricated the entire story to avoid paying legitimate debts. Expert witnesses played a crucial role in helping the jury understand the sophisticated nature of my parents' criminal enterprise and the psychological techniques they had used to control and exploit their victims. Dr. Patricia Hammond, a forensic psychologist specializing in family abuse cases, explained how my parents had used classic manipulation tactics including isolation, financial dependency, and emotional blackmail to maintain control over multiple victims for years. Her testimony helped the jury understand that this wasn't simply a business dispute between family members but rather a systematic pattern of predatory behavior designed to exploit trust and family relationships for financial gain. The prosecution's presentation of financial evidence was devastating to any remaining credibility my parents might have had with the jury. Forensic accountants had traced every dollar of stolen money through multiple accounts and shell companies, creating a comprehensive picture of systematic theft and fraud spanning nearly a decade. The total amount of money they had stolen from various victims exceeded $400,000, far more than anyone had initially suspected. The complexity and sophistication of their money laundering operation impressed even experienced law enforcement officials and demonstrated that this was not opportunistic crime but rather a carefully planned and executed criminal enterprise. My parents' defense strategy was built around portraying themselves as loving parents who had made reasonable requests for loan repayment and had been unfairly targeted by ungrateful children and jealous business partners. Their attorneys attempted to argue that the contract they had tried to force me to sign was simply an aggressive but legitimate business arrangement, and that all the financial irregularities were the result of sloppy bookkeeping rather than intentional fraud. This defense strategy fell apart completely when confronted with the overwhelming evidence of premeditation, the testimony of multiple victims, and the clear pattern of escalating criminal behavior that had culminated in their attempted flight from the country. Brother Jake's testimony was perhaps the most powerful and emotional moment of the entire trial, as he described the psychological manipulation he had endured and the way our parents had used his dreams of becoming a doctor as leverage to control both of us. His innocent trust in our parents had been systematically exploited, and his genuine confusion about their criminal behavior provided the jury with a clear picture of how effective their manipulation tactics had been. When Jake broke down on the witness stand while describing how he had been used as a weapon against me, there wasn't a dry eye in the courtroom, including several of the jurors who were visibly moved by his testimony. The jury deliberation lasted only 3 hours, an unusually short time for such a complex case that indicated their certainty about my parents' guilt on all major charges. When the verdict was read, both Mom and Dad remained stoic and showed no emotion, even when the judge announced that they had been found guilty on all 17 federal charges including racketeering, money laundering, fraud, and conspiracy. The lack of remorse or accountability they displayed even in the face of overwhelming evidence and certain imprisonment demonstrated that they remained convinced of their own righteousness and viewed themselves as victims of an unfair system. Federal sentencing guidelines for the crimes my parents had committed called for substantial prison terms, and Judge Patricia Morrison made it clear during the sentencing hearing that she viewed their behavior as particularly egregious due to the family relationships they had exploited and the vulnerability of their victims. Mom received 14 years in federal prison, while Dad was sentenced to 16 years due to his role as the primary architect of the criminal scheme. The judge's comments during sentencing emphasized that their crimes had caused immeasurable damage not just to their immediate victims but to the fabric of family trust that holds society together. Civil judgments awarded restitution to all identified victims, though the practical reality was that my parents' assets would not be sufficient to fully compensate everyone for their losses. The family home was sold along with their other properties, and the proceeds were distributed according to a court-supervised process that prioritized the victims who had lost the most money relative to their financial capacity. Uncle David's business accounts were restored to their proper balances, and the grandchildren's inheritance money was distributed as originally intended by our grandparents' will. My personal vindication was complete, but the emotional healing process was just beginning as I worked with therapists to process the trauma of discovering that my entire childhood had been built on lies and manipulation. The people I had loved and trusted most in the world had viewed me not as their daughter but as an asset to be exploited for their financial benefit. Learning to trust my own judgment again after years of psychological manipulation required extensive therapy and the support of the genuine family members and friends who had stood by me throughout the ordeal. Professional opportunities multiplied as my story became widely known and companies recognized the courage and integrity I had demonstrated in fighting back against family financial abuse. Morrison Strategic Consulting promoted me to senior consultant ahead of schedule, and I began receiving invitations to speak at conferences and universities about family financial abuse prevention. The platform these opportunities provided allowed me to transform my traumatic experience into something positive that could help protect other potential victims from similar exploitation. Advocacy work became a central focus of my life as I realized that my experience was far from unique and that thousands of young adults were being exploited by family members who used love and trust as weapons for financial gain. The Financial Family Freedom Foundation was established with seed funding from my legal settlement, and within 2 years it was helping hundreds of victims nationwide escape similar situations and rebuild their lives. The foundation's work included legal assistance, counseling services, and educational programs designed to help people recognize and resist family financial manipulation. The legislative impact of our case extended far beyond individual justice as lawmakers recognized the need for stronger protections against family financial abuse. Cassie's Law, named in honor of my case, was passed in 8 states within 3 years of my parents' conviction, creating legal protections for young adults against exploitative contracts with family members and establishing clear penalties for family financial abuse. The law also created reporting requirements for attorneys who draft contracts between family members, ensuring that legal professionals cannot unknowingly participate in exploitation schemes. My parents' appeals were denied at every level as appellate courts found no errors in their convictions and sentences, and their attempts to claim ineffective assistance of counsel were rejected when their own attorneys testified that they had been advised to accept plea bargains but had refused to acknowledge their guilt. The finality of their conviction and the certainty of serving their full sentences provided closure for all their victims and sent a clear message that family financial abuse would be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law regardless of the personal relationships involved. 2 years after the trial concluded, my life had been transformed in ways I never could have imagined during those dark months when my parents were systematically trying to destroy my future and my sense of self. The therapy journey had been challenging and sometimes painful, requiring me to confront not only the trauma of their betrayal but also the deeper questions about how I had been manipulated for so long without recognizing the signs. Dr. Maria Santos, my therapist, specialized in helping survivors of family abuse rebuild their capacity for trust and healthy relationships, and her guidance was instrumental in helping me understand that my parents' behavior was a reflection of their character deficiencies rather than any failure on my part. Professional success came more easily than personal healing, as my experience had taught me valuable lessons about recognizing manipulation and maintaining boundaries that served me well in the business world. Morrison Strategic Consulting had promoted me to the partner track ahead of schedule, recognizing not only my technical skills but also the leadership qualities I had developed through adversity. My colleagues respected the courage I had shown in fighting back against my parents' exploitation, and my story had become something of a legend within the company as an example of integrity and resilience in the face of overwhelming pressure to compromise one's values. The relationship with Tyler had been rebuilt slowly and carefully, with both of us recognizing that we were different people than we had been in high school and that any future together would need to be built on the foundation of who we had become rather than nostalgia for who we used to be. Our engagement came 18 months after my parents' conviction, when I finally felt emotionally ready to commit to building a family with someone who had proven his loyalty and support during the most difficult period of my life. The proposal was simple and private, taking place during a quiet dinner at the restaurant where we had shared our first date nearly 8 years earlier. Brother Jake's recovery had been remarkable to witness, though the process of rebuilding his identity after learning that everything he had believed about our family was a lie had required intensive therapy and significant lifestyle changes. The Witness Protection Program had given him a new name and the opportunity to start fresh at a different medical school, where his academic performance had been excellent and his emotional healing had progressed steadily. Our relationship had been rebuilt on a foundation of mutual understanding and shared trauma, creating a bond that was stronger than our original sibling relationship had ever been. Uncle David had stepped into the role of father figure with grace and genuine affection, filling the void left by our parents' betrayal and providing the kind of stable, supportive adult relationship that I had never really experienced before. His decision to walk me down the aisle at my wedding was one of the most meaningful moments of the entire celebration, symbolizing not just the family I had lost but the family I had chosen and the people who had proven their love through actions rather than words. The wedding itself was small and intimate, surrounded by the people who had supported me through the darkest period of my life and who had earned the right to share in my happiness. The Financial Family Freedom Foundation had grown beyond my wildest expectations, helping more than 500 families in its first 2 years of operation and establishing satellite offices in 12 states. The demand for our services had been overwhelming, confirming that family financial abuse was far more common than most people realized and that victims desperately needed resources and support to escape exploitation. Our legal assistance program had helped dozens of young adults escape contracts similar to the one my parents had tried to force on me, while our counseling services had helped families heal from the trauma of financial betrayal and manipulation. Speaking engagements had become a regular part of my schedule as universities, professional organizations, and advocacy groups invited me to share my story and educate their audiences about family financial abuse prevention. The audiences were always engaged and often emotional, with many people approaching me afterward to share their own experiences of family financial manipulation or to express gratitude for helping them recognize warning signs in their own relationships. These interactions reminded me constantly that my traumatic experience had been transformed into something meaningful that could protect other people from similar exploitation. The book deal with a major publisher had been finalized after months of negotiations, with the advance money being donated entirely to the foundation to fund its expansion into additional states. Betrayed by Blood, A Daughter's Fight Against Family Financial Abuse would be published the following year, with the goal of reaching an even wider audience and providing detailed guidance for other victims of similar exploitation. The writing process had been therapeutic in many ways, allowing me to process my experiences more completely and to organize the lessons I had learned into a format that could help other people navigate similar challenges. Professional milestone achievements kept coming as my reputation in the consulting industry grew and my expertise became widely recognized by clients and competitors alike. The senior partnership offer from Morrison had come with a substantial salary increase and equity participation that would provide long-term financial security, ironically achieving the kind of success that my parents had claimed to want for me while trying to steal it for themselves. The financial independence I now enjoyed was sweeter because it had been earned through my own efforts and protected through my own courage rather than handed to me as a gift with hidden strings attached. Personal growth had been the most important achievement of all, as I learned to trust my own judgment again and to build healthy relationships based on mutual respect rather than fear or obligation. The woman I had become was stronger, more confident, and more aware of her own worth than the frightened college graduate who had walked into that lawyer's office 2 years earlier. The process of healing had taught me that true strength comes not from avoiding difficult situations but from facing them with integrity and refusing to compromise your values even when the cost is high. The wedding planning process had been joyful and stress-free, a stark contrast to the drama and manipulation that had characterized every major event during my parents' control over my life. Tyler's family had welcomed me warmly, and their healthy family dynamics had provided a model for the kind of relationships I wanted to build in my own future family. The ceremony would be held in Uncle David's backyard garden, surrounded by the people who had proven their love through their actions and their support during the most difficult period of my life. Financial literacy programs had become another focus of the Foundation's work as we recognized that many young adults lacked the knowledge and skills needed to recognize and resist financial manipulation by family members or others. Our high school education program had been implemented in over 50 schools across the country, teaching students about healthy financial boundaries, recognizing manipulation tactics, and understanding their rights and options when faced with exploitative contracts or agreements. The program had already helped several students recognize and escape family financial abuse before it could escalate to the level I had experienced. Legislative victories continued to accumulate as more states passed versions of Cassie's Law and federal legislators began considering national protections against family financial abuse. The legal framework we had helped create was making it easier for other victims to seek justice and harder for perpetrators to exploit family relationships for financial gain. The policy work was complex and time-consuming, but the potential impact on protecting vulnerable young adults made every hour spent on advocacy worthwhile. Therapeutic breakthroughs came regularly as I worked through the complex emotions surrounding forgiveness, family loyalty, and personal responsibility in relationships damaged by abuse and betrayal. Learning to forgive myself for not recognizing the manipulation earlier had been more difficult than forgiving my parents for perpetrating it. But Dr. Santos had helped me understand that victims of systematic manipulation should not blame themselves for falling prey to sophisticated psychological tactics deployed by people they trusted. The forgiveness work was not about excusing my parents' behavior but about freeing myself from the anger and resentment that would otherwise have poisoned my future relationships and personal happiness. The honeymoon planning had been an exercise in building new traditions and creating positive experiences to replace the traumatic memories associated with family celebrations. Tyler and I had chosen a destination that neither of us had visited before, ensuring that the trip would create entirely new memories uncontaminated by past experiences. The 2 weeks in New Zealand would provide an opportunity to explore a beautiful country while also having deep conversations about our hopes and plans for building a family together based on love, respect, and healthy communication rather than the manipulation and control that had characterized my childhood home. Final reflections on the journey from victim to survivor to advocate had taught me that healing from family abuse is not a destination but an ongoing process that requires constant attention and care. The scars left by my parents' betrayal would always be part of my story, but they no longer defined my identity or limited my potential for happiness and success. The experience had taught me that family is not determined by blood relationships but by the people who choose to love and support you unconditionally, even when doing so requires personal sacrifice or courage. Legacy building had become an important consideration as I thought about the long-term impact of my experience and how it could continue to help other people long after I was gone. The Foundation would continue its work regardless of my personal involvement, and the legislative changes we had championed would protect future generations of young adults from family financial exploitation. Most importantly, the courage I had shown in fighting back against my parents' scheme had inspired dozens of other victims to come forward and seek justice, creating a ripple effect of accountability that would discourage future perpetrators from attempting similar crimes. The final message I wanted to share with anyone who might be facing similar challenges was that you have the right to be treated with dignity and respect by your family members, and that love should never be used as a weapon to extract compliance or financial benefit. True family relationships are built on mutual support and encouragement rather than exploitation and control, and you deserve better than being treated as an investment asset by the people who are supposed to love you unconditionally. The courage to fight back against family abuse is difficult to find, but it is always worth the effort because your freedom and dignity are more valuable than any financial security that comes with strings attached. The closing scene of this chapter of my life would be holding my future nephew, Jake's son, and making a solemn promise that he would grow up in a family where love was freely given rather than used as leverage for personal gain. Breaking the cycle of abuse and manipulation that had characterized previous generations of our family was perhaps the most important work I would ever do, ensuring that future children would be raised with healthy boundaries and genuine support rather than the conditional love and hidden agendas that had made my own childhood such a traumatic experience. The baby in my arms represented hope for the future and proof that it is possible to create new traditions built on love, honesty, and respect rather than the exploitation and betrayal that had nearly destroyed everything I held dear. Have you ever experienced family financial pressure or manipulation? What would you do if your own parents tried to control your entire future like this? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more real-life stories about overcoming family drama and building healthy relationships. Don't forget to share this video with anyone who might need to hear about recognizing family financial abuse. You never know who might need this information to protect themselves or someone they love. Thank you so much for watching and supporting these important conversations about family dynamics and financial boundaries. Remember that you deserve to be treated with love and respect by the people closest to you, and never let anyone convince you that exploitation is just another word for love. Take care of yourselves, and I'll see you in the next video with another story of courage, resilience, and the power of standing up for what's right.